This evening's entertainment is brought to you by the word
fire.
So would you please scream it in the comment section like we're in the middle of a crowded movie theater. If you enjoyed this video, also leave it a like. That appeases my technocratic overlords. With that said, I hope you enjoyed tonight's story.
I studied the VHS tape. It was one of those pop-in shells, the ones that have an open slot in the center where you can throw in a camera cartridge and watch your home movies without having to process them at the film store. It was exactly what I was looking for. Any idea where this is from? I asked.
No.
The man replied, wiping away about a quarter of the sweat that had gathered in his beard. The rest of it kept dripping on the remainder of his strange wares. He watched me with an utter disdain, but I gave it another shot. Really? Like, where did you find it? Come on, a little bit of background would be nice.
It's not a boutique, buddy. You're at a flea market. You either buy it or you can fuck off. Too hot to deal with this detective shit,
He said. Probably because I was the only customer at his stall. His tone softened.
Got it from his storage unit auction. That's all I can tell you. Don't keep track of this shit, I just sell it.
That's all the information I needed. I paid the man and took my mysterious prize home. Back in the early 2000s, I consumed YouTube vlogs like they were fine caviar and I was a Russian oligarch. There was just something about being able to kick back and become an invisible observer in someone else's existence that really got to me. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't some desperate basement dweller. I still had a functioning life of my own. But when evening came and all of my responsibilities were checked off, I'd jump behind the computer desk and take a break from reality. I'd sit back and watch hours upon hours of other people's lives. I watched a lonely man beat cancer, a promising student struggle with pills, a teen mother who cracked under the pressure of her new responsibilities. I watched people overcome and spiral and regress. I watched slices of raw humanity from all across the globe from the comfort of my own home. I got to get a taste of fates I never would have considered otherwise. A bunch of people speaking to inanimate objects reminding me that the world outside was vaster than I ever could conceive. Then the internet money rolled in and ruined it all. As soon as the people bearing their soul into the camera lens realized they could get paid, all of the honesty seeped out of their videos. They built up the drama to get more views. They started hiring editors to make them look good. They started to advertise products that no one really needed. Whatever bond I felt to the lives that I have observed for so many years was broken. That rawness of human stories that I craved was gone. But I still craved it. That's when I started going to flea markets and buying abandoned home movies. What I found on those assorted VHS tapes and unlabeled DVDs was much better than anything I could hope for with YouTube. These people acted completely naturally. The awkward pauses, the obvious annoyances, the grumpy people who didn't want to be on tape. It all made it so much easier to imagine that I was there. The fact that I didn't know I was watching made all the difference. Voyeurism. I know. That's what my girlfriend called it. She's my wife now, and she still calls it that. But what is marriage if not a descent into accepting your partner's quirks? She treats the dog like she's our daughter, and unless she starts breastfeeding, you won't hear me complain. My flea market bargain trips usually get an eye roll out of her, but there was never any yelling involved. As I pulled up the driveway, however, Laura was waving her arms around, yelling.
3 hours? Are you serious, Ryan? 3 hours out of the city for some stupid tapes?
Betty stood obediently by her, gazing up at her as if she was some Greek goddess. Her little sausage tail wagged a bit when she saw me walk up the porch, but after a quick glance she shook her head and looked back up at my wife. I was just a background character in that dog's life. I could have told Laura that all the markets around the city limits were tapped out, that any unmarked tapes I could find around town usually ended up being recordings of movies from television with the advertisements still kept in. But I didn't. This wasn't about the tapes. What's wrong? I asked.
There's something broken in Betty's neck. I need to take her to the vet, and my husband decides to drive out to some cornfield and look for porn.
The dog shook her head again, and again. The tapes aren't porn, they're... Echoes of the therapist we stopped going to bounced around my skull. This was not the time nor place for that argument. Something else wrong?
I can't find her passport, every other bit of documentation I have, but I've looked all around the house and I can't find her passport.
Laura's anger gave way to fear. The dog shook its head again.
See? Look! There's something wrong with her neck!
I was going to ask her why the hell she thought she needed the dog passport for a vet check, but I didn't. I just shrugged. Haven't seen it.
Well, I hope they take us without it,
she said, as if the chance for Betty's neck getting checked out without travel documents was slim to none.
I'll call you when I know what's wrong. Can you do the laundry? Left whites by the machine. You just need to put them in.
Laura made her way to the car with the dog. Betty shook her head again.
God, I hope you're okay.
Laura whispered to her pet.
I'll need a glass of wine when we come back,
she said to me. My wife and her dog drove off. I was just about to close the washing machine when I noticed a pair of my red boxers peeking out from the pile of whites. When I took them out, I noticed Laura's blue university t-shirt. In my haste to get to my mysterious tape, I didn't check if the laundry was sorted. It wasn't. The sorting couldn't have taken longer than 2 minutes, and for 30 seconds I tried, but my eyes quickly drifted to the television in the corner of the basement. The prospect of sorting through my dirty laundry instead of indulging in someone else's seemed like torture. I turned on the tape, just to get a glimpse of what I was getting into. Then I go and do that thing my wife told me to do. Within seconds of turning on the VCR, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. The tape was exactly what I was craving. The timestamp in the lower right corner read June 14th, 1994. We were inside of a fancy house. Nice marble staircases and oil paintings of mildly inbred aristocrats filled the screen as the camera shook and bobbed around the wedding reception. Whoever was behind the lens had no idea what they were doing. The zoom and shake of the video made it barely watchable. It was perfect. I could imagine standing there, among the fancily dressed guests, watching someone swing around a hulking piece of Sony in utter confusion. A group of children wearing miniature suits and dresses ran by the camera. The boys made faces and giggled. One girl in a yellow dress waved to the lens.
Jesus, Jessica, where were you? I've been looking for you.
A hushed female whisper cut through the hubbub of the reception. I jumped for my remote to turn up the volume.
I'm just recording stuff. Mary said she wanted a video of today.
Jessica replied as she zoomed in on a very old man standing out into the ether.
Well, there's a problem.
The other voice hissed.
What's wrong?
The crowd walked around the old man like he didn't exist. Jessica swung the camera at a particularly uninteresting part of the carpet.
Mary's ex is here. He's freaking out at the gate, demanding they let him in.
Is it Todd?
Jessica pronounced the word Todd with the same intonation one would pronounce terminal cancer.
I think so.
The other voice whispered.
Shit.
For a split second I saw nervously clasped hands against a bright blue dress, but then the video cut out. Complete darkness. My phone dinged.
They took us without the passport, thank God.
I ignored it and stared at the screen, hoping that another part of the story would flicker into existence. After a couple waves of static, it did. A courtyard with a view of a stunning mountain range, in it a bride and groom. The woman, a Venus of the 90s. The man, a chiseled jawline with too much gel in his hair. They were smiling at each other, but the camera was too far off to tell whether those smiles were genuine. In front of the possibly happy couple was an array of wooden chairs seating the guests of the wedding. Beneath their feet, a sea of sparkling calm gently swayed. A layer of crystal glass divided the family and friends from the pool below them. The man next to the camera kept coughing. Someone next to him whispered something, but that didn't stop the coughs. The couple kept looking at each other. Then the video cut out. The darkness of the screen dragged on. For a split second, I even considered getting the laundry out of the way. But just as I was about to reach into the washing machine for Laura's orange stocking, another image crackled to life on the screen. We were back in the courtyard, but it was in considerably worse state. Cigarette stubs peeked out of the once impressive stone floor. Empty and sometimes broken bottles were all over the place, and where there was once a sea of calm, there was now the shell of a pool filled with broken furniture. Even smashed up with rough axe cuts, the dressers and chairs still looked expensive. It was evening. August 19th, 2002, and the groom from 8 years ago was wearing a dirty pink bathrobe. The man had aged a couple of decades. His hair was gathered around his shoulders in thick, greasy clumps. A patching beard of graying hair now covered his chiseled jawline.
You changed me,
he said. A cigarette hissed in his mouth and a controlled madness burnt in his eyes.
You changed me. I used to like people. I used to want to do some good in this world. I could have done some good in this world.
The man bent down and produced a bottle off the floor.
But you hurt me. You hurt me so bad. I just want to see everything burn.
The man continued ranting and raving, but as he walked away from the camera, his words fell to a static-filled whisper. I turned up the volume as loud as it would go, but the only thing I could hear was the chirping of crickets, intercut by a steady bassy tone. Out in the mountains beyond a courtyard, there was a grouping of lit-up tents. A man was going quietly insane as a fancy house, as people across the valley indulged in cheery techno music. I was watching someone go insane on a summer evening. This tape was better than anything I could have ever hoped for. The man in the bathrobe took a pull from the bottle, recoiled, and then smashed the thing against the mountain of furniture stacked in the pool. He screamed. I heard that part.
You ever talk about fire with Todd? Ever talk about how much you wouldn't want to burn alive?
The man was back in front of the camera now. He was swaying from side to side, clearly off balance from whatever was in that bottle.
Of course you don't. All you two talk about is vapid bullshit. All you do is waste your stupid lives, stuck in meaningless gossip that doesn't matter. But you know what? You know what?
The man paused. A gentle gust of wind blew his filthy bathrobe apart. revealing far too much of his malnourished body. For a second he tried to pull the flimsy bit of pink cloth back around his jagged ribcage, but with a frustrated sigh he gave up on his drunken hands. Memories of wasted nights in high school filled my head. I remember how the world spun, how impossibly bright and quick all the headlights were as I stumbled my way back home, how difficult it was to stand upright with my blood full of booze. Once the body is so far off in the deep end of the whiskey pool, there's only one way to momentarily regain balance. The man on the television squished his face into an effort-filled wink. For a blink I was standing there, in his ratty flip-flops, watching the triple vision of the world focus into a singular blurry image.
I love you,
he mumbled to himself. He tore his eye away from the camera and stared down at his dying cigarette.
But I won't love you for long. No, I won't. Because I'll be dead. And you'll be dead. And he'll be dead. The world will burn.
The man reached behind the camera and produced another cigarette, but he didn't light it. He studied the stick of tobacco for a bit and put it behind his ear.
How much do you know about fire?
He asked, reaching down.
You don't know shit about fire.
He hissed, as he re-emerged off-screen with a jerry can.
I've been reading my great-uncle's books. They say old Werner Zeig was mad. But how could a madman build all of this? Could a madman create an empire out of nothing? Could a madman...
He spilled a bit of the gasoline out of the can as he waved around his arms. This calmed him down somewhat. The madman's voice dropped to a whisper. The music across the valley slowed down to a steady low heartbeat.
I've been reading Werner Zeig's books. And I know more about fire than your feeble mind ever could.
The words that the man spoke came out in a controlled whisper, but the ideas that lingered in his monologue flickered with madness. Fire was not a tool that humanity discovered. It was a portal to another realm that our primitive ancestors had stumbled upon and were too simple to comprehend. He spoke of flames as if they were hands, as if the flashes of chemical energy that burst out of a bonfire were fingers from a different world that were desperately trying to claw themselves into our realm.
My uncle warned of the power that exists in the fire. He spoke of Alexandria, of Peshtigo, of Bois du Casier, of fires that ravaged humanity, but he spoke of them as if they were mistakes, as if we were lucky that the flames were put out. He was wrong. The man was a genius, but in this one essential thing he faltered. Each time that the burning god emerged, humanity was given a chance of becoming pure, and they spit out the embers of freedom. Every time that the burning god's arrival was postponed, it was a tragedy. But even that tragedy can be brought to rest.
He went over to the pool and started pouring gasoline on the broken down furniture. As he poured, he spoke, but he was too far away in the camera's microphone. The music across the valley started to grow in tempo. The man started to punctuate his inaudible rants with manic shouts.
I will summon him!
He shouted. With the techno music playing in the background, he sounded like a misguided DJ trying to hype up a tired dive bar. After the can ran dry, he produced another one and resumed pouring and rambling. The man might have emptied out his pool and filled it with chopped up furniture, but he was far off in the deep end. Less than half a year after I got out of university, I also got out of my first real relationship. 5 years of raw connection in the trash, and unemployment to boot. I was desperate for any form of affirmation in my life. I bought dozens of pickup artist books that offered to teach me the secret to making women want to sleep with me. Watching that broken man pour gasoline all over the antique furniture, a part of me felt his pain. It's not that difficult to fall for a cult when your heart is broken. My phone dinged again.
There's something in Betty's ear. Doctor says not serious. She's such a trooper. Laundry done?
I barely looked away from the television. The man in the bathrobe was done with the pouring. He was back in front of the camera now. A cigarette dangled from his lips. He was thinking. Fear broke through the mania in his eyes. He turned around and looked at the festival across the valley. The sun had set by then, but bright lights flashed across the darkening sky from the music-filled tents. The man let out a desperate groan. For a second it looked as if he would walk away from the fire to be, as if he would give up on whatever ritual he was trying to perform, but before he could give up, his right hand flew through the air. He slapped himself, dropping the cigarette. After he picked it up, he slapped himself again.
I will summon him!
He screamed at the camera as he lit up his smoke.
And he will burn the world!
He took one long puff of his cigarette and threw it into the pool. For a moment he simply stood there, a man in a filthy bathrobe with dark mountains stretched out in front of him. He looked at peace. He screamed. He screamed in a way I didn't think was possible for a grown man to scream. He screamed and ran through the courtyard, burning. He spun in place like a wounded animal, shedding his bathrobe, but as the flames behind him started to consume the furniture, his body propelled him away from the inferno. Screeching and limping, the man ran towards the camera. He knocked it over in his escape, but it kept recording. The fire soon drowned his agonizing cries out. Only his burning bathrobe remained. Out across the valley, the tents lit up with another color, the flashing of blue and red. For a couple beats of the far-off techno, I could see the siren lights traveling down the mountain road, but the flames quickly cut off my line of sight. My phone dinged again. I didn't look at it. I was so enthralled in the video that I'd started chewing on my shirt collar. Haven't done that since I was 8. The flames reached out into the night sky like clawed fingers. They grasped at oxygen, growing, roaring, demanding more. The fire spread throughout the screen. I tilted my head sideways to see better. The inferno beckoned to me. I was on my feet, staring into the television. It was as if the fire was calling for me, pulling me in, demanding that I join it in that crackling universe of energy. In the cool air of my basement, I felt warmth. I reached out for the television.
You should have seen the size of the thing that they pulled out of her ear. We need to be careful when we let her run in the... Ryan? Ryan, what are you doing?
Laura stood on the stairs. Betty squeezed herself past and gave my calf a lick before jumping on the couch. My eyes shifted towards the open washing machine. Her gaze followed me.
You didn't do the laundry. Great. Absolutely great. Come on, Ryan. We talked about this. I don't ask for a lot. I just want...
It took me a second to realize she stopped talking. As she spoke, my eyes drifted back towards the screen. Out in that burning hellscape, I could see something move. I could see a beak. 2 orbs of blue flame stared back at me. I tore my attention away from the Eldritch god and back towards my wife. Sorry.
What are you doing?
She walked down the last couple of steps with a controlled anger that cracked as soon as she saw what was on the television.
Jesus Christ, Ryan! What the hell are you watching?
It's, some guy was going through a bad divorce, I think, so he tried to set the world on fire. Burned himself in the process, and now there's... As hot as the inferno on the screen was, her icy stare cut through me. She inhaled sharply, turning her words into cold steel.
That shit belongs in an evidence locker, not our house.
Laura stomped her way back up the stairs, with Betty barely making it past the door before she slammed it. I turned my attention back towards the screen. Whatever presence I saw hiding in that fire was gone now. The flames still tore through the sky with an animalistic fever, but the beast's eyes were gone. The fire rolled on for a couple of minutes before its thunderous cry turned into a hiss. A burst of water was softening the flames. Soon enough, firefighters were talking about how they wished they could have stayed at the festival. As they sprayed water over the gasoline-filled pool, one of them proceeded to give a 5-paragraph essay's worth of description of a redhead bartender he once saw in the 90s. I thought about rewinding the tape, about going back to that moment when I saw those burning balls of light hiding in a storm of bristling energy, but I decided against it. Upstairs, I could hear a cork get angrily pulled out of a wine bottle. I sorted through the washing machine, turned it on, and went to get a wine glass. "I'm sorry," I said. She was on the porch, puffing on a cigarette with one hand and scratching Betty behind the ear with the other. She didn't look at me as she spoke.
You can't keep doing this, Ryan. This isn't about laundry. This is about you not being reliable. You can't just drop everything to indulge in your voyeurism.
I tried to remember all 3 parts of the 3-part apology thing that our therapist kept on rambling about back in the day. I'm sorry for not being reliable and sometimes acting like a child. I'll try to do better next time. Her lack of yelling made me reconsider therapy for a split second. So, Betty okay now? The dog wagged her tail at the mention of her name.
Oh yeah, she was a real trooper. Held still for the dog, shook a bit, but didn't move her head at all. Everyone in the lobby kept on saying how cute she is.
Asking about Betty would always get Laura talking. We finished the bottle of wine, watched some shitty reality TV show, made love, and now Laura is sleeping on my chest. Betty curled up by her feet and seems to be having a dream that involves a lot of biting and running. There's a nice summer breeze outside. I should be sleeping. The thought of going back to the basement and rewinding the tape was there as soon as we finished the wine. But Laura wanted to watch some scripted reality TV show about hot people looking for love on a beach, and I figured I'd be a good partner and indulge with her. The question of the sentient inferno disappeared during our own little fiery bout of passion. But now that we're post-coital and cuddled up, I can't let go of the memory of those hungry claws. She's a light sleeper, so if I move, she'll wake up and be disappointed. And I don't want to disappoint her. She might have a weird relationship with a dog and a horrible taste in entertainment, but I'd probably be burning furniture without her. Maybe she's right. Maybe the video does belong in some sort of evidence locker instead of our basement. All this is bouncing around in my head and I can't get any sleep. So I figured I'd come to this little insomniac corner of the internet and vent for a bit. I'm torn between the mystery of what that desperate man brought into our world and being a decent husband. My wife just mumbled something about how I should go to sleep. I think the light from my phone is keeping her up.
They crowd around me, some of the brightest men and women that humanity has to offer. They could be out in the world curing cancer, but instead they have chosen to stay on retainer.
Mr. Wernerzig, you're awake.
One of them says, "Yes, awake." Consciousness drifts into my hospital bed along with another sensation, pain. Every inch of my skin feels like it's home to a smoldering fire. Sitting up causes the flames to roar.
Please, Mr. Wernerzig, in your current state you shouldn't—
Bite your tongue, wench,
I say, feeling my once mighty voice slumber in a choked whisper.
Be careful how you speak to me.
She remembers her place and bows her head in shame, as do all of the other doctors. I'm surrounded with medical equipment that far exceeds the stature of the room. From the window, I see a glimpse of a snowy backwater town. The nature calendar on the wall reads January 18th, 2004. I don't know where I am. I don't remember the past 5 months of my life.
Where is Albert?
I demand. As if on cue, the old man appears in the doorway. His suit is prim and proper, but the usual stoic expression on his face is betrayed by joy.
Sire, you're awake. Thank the heavens.
It comes back to me in flashes. The heartbreak, the whiskey, the axe, the gasoline, and then the explosion of light.
Call the car. I want to go home,
I say.
Certainly.
The butler replies. He nods to one of my doctors, promptly turning him into a secretary.
Do you know where you are, sire?
Memories of crawling through the dark wood simmer in the back of my skull. They feel like the fever dreams of a starving animal, but I know they are mine.
Yes,
I say. My lips are scabbed pieces of flesh. I get up to walk to the mirror across the room.
Sire, the medical team was dispatched as soon as this yokel hospital alerted the estate, but the damage from your accident has been extensive. Very little could be saved. However, over the past months, the team has been hard at work, fast-tracking research into synthetic skin. Perhaps you would like to try the latest prototype before you look into the mirror.
The butler almost steps in my way, but he knows better. I continue making my way towards the impending reflection. I want to see what I have done. I see the extent of the damage. I have paid many times for my tendency for intoxicated outbursts of heartbreak throughout my life, but I have never paid a price so steep.
Bring me the skin,
I say. The metal box in which they present the poreless mask of flesh to me hisses with cool steam. The synthetics are like a calming balm to my burning skin. But when I look into the mirror, I see a grotesque charade.
I want to go home,
I say. In the car, he tells me the fire was extinguished soon enough to spare the house, that the businesses have been running smoothly, that the media have been largely kept out of the picture. I scarcely pay attention. My mind is far too occupied with the accident. My mind is far too occupied with the flames. A single question burns in my mind. Was the fire an error of drunken sentimentality, or not an error at all?
Sire, if I may, I do not want to intrude on your personal life. However...
The butler clears his throat and shifts uncomfortably in his seat.
When my daughter went through her divorce, I saw firsthand how heartbreak can haunt a person. If you require anyone to speak to, I assure you that...
You are intruding,
I say, catching a glimpse of myself in the car mirror. I look away. Alphonse Werner Zeig elevated his crest from that of an irrelevant noble family to a titan of industry. While other branches of European royalty struggled to keep their grip on power in the century of the ballot box, Alphonse refrained from using his wealth for political sway, and instead invested it into the future of humanity. He invested it into the machines. By the turn of the 20th century, the Werner Zeig family owned a share of every factory in Central Europe. After the wars and after some heavy investment into the Americas, we owned everything. My granduncle built an empire. My granduncle also wrote about fire. Before the old man disappeared from the face of the earth, he locked himself in his mountain manor and wrote a dizzying amount of text about the nature of flames. His early work read like a simple inquiry about the nature of the element, but as the journals stack, as his handwriting grows more manic, as his words swell numerous enough to fill a library, the appearance of interest betrays its true nature as a burning obsession. Alphonse Werner Zeig was haunted by fire. He wrote of it not as an invention of humanity, but as a portal to a world beyond our comprehension. Our primitive ancestors had simply stumbled upon this chaotic doorway and built civilization in the warmth of its flames. But beyond that crackling energy, beyond that stifling heat, there was something else, something that demanded entry into our realm. My granduncle saw its burning eyes in a Manchurian steppe fire in 1938. I saw those same orbs of blue blaze in the night of my accident. I walked through the library. The books I've thrown to the floor in my fit of delirium are cleared away. The bookshelves that I've accidentally kindling have been replaced. The help has repaired the room to its former glory. Only one memory of the accident remains. My granduncle's journal is still under study, opened at its final pages, just as I left it. My thick, pale fingers feel foreign against the pages. My eyelids scratch across my new face. But I read every word of that final journal. It is after reading those blurry pages in a drunken stupor that I decided my granduncle was a fool. It is after reading those pages that I decided I would burn the world. Yet as I sit here, with only pain and a single glass of scotch dulling my senses, those words appear empty. Whilst my granduncle committed an entire library to studying the nature of fire, to suggesting and eventually demanding that something lives deep within it, the final journal talks of the creature within the flames as something that should be ignored. He denies those blue balls of light. He drowns his words in sentimentality. He writes that each time that the beast within the fire appears, it is a great tragedy for all of humanity. He speaks of the times that the beast was extinguished out of our realm as a time of triumph of human will, as something that must be celebrated with the utmost zeal. In my drunkenness, I saw the words of his final journal as pure blasphemy, but in my soberness they simply confused me. If he saw what I saw the night of my accident, if he too looked into those azure eyes of raw power, he could not have written such foolish lies. I studied a handwriting, clean and sharp. When I first inherited the mountain manor, I found the butler trying to dispose of the schematics. He had hidden them in one of my granduncle's coats that was set to be burnt. When I found them, he protested. He insisted that my granduncle must have simply misplaced the documents and forgotten about it. But I knew that he acted with malice. He wanted those schematics destroyed. If my wife had not pleaded with me to keep the old man in my employment, he would have been long gone. I take the schematics out of their display cabinet and spread them out across the study. The madly sketched maw of the metal machine stares back at me. Next to it are the scribbled descriptions of each segment of the contraption, detailed instructions on how much pressure and heat should be funneled through each individual pipe. The text is heavy on the page, yet even though the blocks of words linger like censor bars trying to mask the true horror of the machine, the handwriting is rough and uneven. At the bottom of the document is an address, scratched out in big black letters, the Bohemian Plot. I look back at the final journal entries. My granduncle was no fool. I send the butler to make inquiries about the land my family owns in Bohemia, and retire to my bedchamber. My doubts about the journal slowly start turning into certainties, but as I enter the cold room, I find myself unable to light my fireplace. What if my granduncle was truly mad? What if my accident was truly a result of drunken heartbreak? What if I have simply gone momentarily insane? Lighting the fire would illuminate those questions, but I do not want answers. I want sleep. Even with sheets of the softest silk, my body still sings as I curl my way into the land of dream. She stands in the library, beautiful as the day I met her.
Peter, please,
she says.
Sit.
Do not tell me what to do, I reply. The rawness has gone from my throat. I sound like myself. I feel powerful. That power quickly drains.
Please, Peter, sit. I love you.
I find myself sitting. She has hurt me. She has betrayed my trust, yet each moment that I spend in a gentle grip of her eyes sends an unearthly calm throughout my body. She smiles, weakly, and takes a seat opposite me.
I have been unfaithful, Peter, and for that I apologize.
I reach for the rage deep in the pit of my stomach, but I cannot find it. This woman has sullied my honor, betrayed me in the most cutting of ways, yet I cannot help but love her.
I'll never do it again. I'll forever be true. I promise.
And with that, all restraint leaves my body. I love you, Mary. Let's forget all about this and live happily ever after.
Yes, Peter. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Let's leave the past behind and bathe in the light of our love.
Her soft hands reach across the table and grab mine. The future stretches out in front of us. I can see joy. I can see the children. I can see us growing old together. As if she was a conductor of bliss, I feel a wave of happiness flow from her palms to the rest of my being. For the first time in my life, I feel fully content. But then, that connection is severed. My wife gets up from her chair and walks across the library floor. Her hips sway with hypnotic energy. For a second, I try to convince myself that she is simply walking around the table to be closer to me, but soon her true destination becomes undeniable. In the corner of the room stands the brute. His body is bare, his muscles pulse with strength. My wife wraps her arms around him and the two embrace. "Mary!" I yell, sensing a weakness in my voice that makes me loathe myself. "How could you?" She frees her lips of his and looks back at me in shock.
Peter, I have been unfaithful, and for that, I apologize.
She says, still in his arms.
I'll never do it again. I'll forever be true. I promise.
The two embrace again. The brute's hands start unlatching my wife's dress. I want to beg them to stop. I want to believe her lies, but instead, I turn away. I feel raw power crackling in my hands. I'm holding a burning torch. The fire roars, demanding to be spread. Behind me, my wife starts to make love to the brute against one of our bookshelves. Their cries of passion are loud, but soon the spreading fire drowns them out. Soon they are screaming. Soon they are dead. I stand in the midst of the burning library, watching all of my granduncle's writing feed a powerful force beyond my comprehension. The curtain of flames closes in around me, thickening its consistency with each written word that it consumes. My skin breaks out in boils, sweat sizzles on my smouldering clothes. A cry of pain scratches through my burning throat. When my body finally erupts in flames, I see it. That burning beak, those shining claws, the two infernal balls of blue light.
"Release me,"
the god says in a voice that shakes the universe.
"Release me and taste my power."
Even past the smell of singed flesh that has been lingering in my nose since the accident, I can still feel the gentle burnt notes of freshly brewed coffee. On my bedside table there is a silver platter with breakfast. Beneath my plate there is a carefully written note.
Sire, I have made inquiries about the Bohemian plot. The land is currently under your ownership. I would, however, note that the plot of land is deep underground and is located beneath a busy transport hub. Perhaps I can draw up a list of property that would be more appropriate for construction.
I study the note, but become distracted. My left eyelid refuses to cooperate with the rest of my body. I attempt to hold it up, but as I read, my numb fingers lack the dexterity to do so. I become frustrated. The handwriting on the note is clean and sharp. Any doubts that I had the night before turn to ash. After lighting the fireplace, I summon the butler under the pretense of cleaning up the broken plates of my breakfast. The silk bathrobe I put on feels raw against my burnt body, but I no longer feel like an imposter. I'm resolute in both my character and decisions. The metal object in the robe's pocket feels lighter than it is.
Sire, you rang? I have compiled a list of...
The butler goes silent as soon as he sees me.
Sire, your face.
A glint of discomfort flashes over the old man's brow as he glances at the torn suit of synthetic flesh that I have thrown on the floor, but he quickly regains his composure.
Shall I have the medical team?
No,
I say. My fingers caress the chamber of the revolver in my pocket. The cold steel feels good against my burning skin. The butler is getting nervous.
I have compiled a list of other potential properties that you could consider for a construction project,
he says, and then, as if it has just occurred to him, he takes out a crumpled envelope.
There is also a letter that has arrived this morning. It's from your ex-wife, sire.
I take my hand out of my bathrobe and inspect the letter. It is not dated. It seems older than recent. I read it regardless. In it, I find words of regret. Mary is sorry for what happened. She is heartbroken about my accident. She wishes that she could turn back time and make different decisions. She hopes that I will one day forgive her. The handwriting of the letter is clean and sharp. I throw it in the fire.
Did you write this, Albert?
I ask, as the flame sees the paper.
No, sire. It was written by your ex-wife.
My hand travels back into the pocket of the bathrobe.
Who wrote Alphonse Werner Zeg's final journal?
He opens his mouth, but doesn't answer. His knees grow weak. He starts to shake.
Sire, could I take a seat?
I let the old man sit opposite to me. The fireplace rages on. He sighs.
Your granduncle was a genius, sire. His sense for industry, his inquisitive mind, they were unmatched, but...
His voice falls. A tear starts to travel down his cheek.
His obsession with the fire. The plans for the machine. I could not idly stand by and let the man burn the world. But please, sire, consider the implications. Consider the suffering. Consider the...
Silence,
I say. That's all I have to say. The butler has been with the family for long enough to know what is coming.
Can I speak to my daughter one last time? Can I at least say goodbye?
My clawed fingers tighten over the handle of the revolver.
No,
I say. Once his body is cleared away, I summon his replacement. The new butler is much less resistant to my demands, possibly because he knows how his predecessor ended up. He calls our representative in the Czech Republic to investigate the state of the Bohemian plot. He organizes a corps of engineers to oversee the project. He starts to make inquiries about the covert transportation of steel. The machine will take an astronomical amount of man-hours to construct. Thousands of workers will be needed, mountains of steel will have to be delivered, countless bribes will have to be paid, but eventually, my granduncle's work will be completed. The machine will create a fire hotter than the strongest flame that humanity has ever felt. And when it does, the burning god will purify our realm. Soon, the world will burn, and I will be the one to light the spark.
There's just something about looking into that pitch-black metal throat that bubbles up discomforting thoughts in a janitor's brain. With nothing but the quiet buzzing of fluorescent lamps for company, people in my line of work start to see things in those tunnels. Shapes curl in and out of the space between imagination and reality. Whispers and groans and pleas, once conjured up in the head, start to bleed out and echo through the empty halls. Faced with the confounding transportation catacombs of Prague, most cleaners don't last a fortnight. Even after 3 years of service, I still sometimes find myself troubled by the seeds of horror which the Prague metro system plants in the human spirit. But when I do find myself anxious about what could be hiding in those still shadows, I practice a simple form of mental hygiene. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. I imagine myself standing in my janitor overalls in the center of my soul. All of my fears about the subway tunnels, be they fevered visions of tentacles reaching out from the darkness, or echoes of primal grunts coming from the gullet of the underground, they all become droplets of grime I have to clean. I distill all my fears, all my anxieties, all thoughts which I do not want, into dirty footsteps on the floor of my soul, and then I put down my mop and move it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And sooner than you could say soap, the station is clean. The morning commuters are shuffling down the escalators, and I get to re-emerge into the Prague sun with a newfound energy and a sense of a job well done. Instead of suffering with the dark dreams that the Prague subway system weaves into reality, I would spend each night gliding along those dirty tiles in a meditative mop-based trance. With a bit of focus and some breath work, I thought I had managed to tame any amount of discomfort that the mysteries of the metro might cause me. For 3 calm years, my system has worked, but last week it all started to fall apart. Mr. Voharlik was a good boss, one of those people who are so quick with a joke and so full of cheer that one starts to wonder whether they aren't a highly functional alcoholic. Yet when he called me into his office to talk about my new work placement, there was nothing but sorrow in his eyes. Smíchovské Nádraží, the ugly stepsister of Prague's main railway depot, was the station I was assigned to clean for the next month. I didn't think much of it, just another stop on the yellow line that saw a fair amount of foot traffic and was in need of a nightly mop-down. It wasn't until later that I found out that Smíchovské Nádraží had a dedicated janitor. It wasn't until later that I found out that the janitor went missing.
The station is to be cleaned like a regular station, but there is one exception to be made,
Mr. Voharlik said, his voice descending into the fine line between speech and a conspiratory whisper.
At the north side of the station, there is a steel door. Do not clean anything beyond it. Do not enter it. The further you stay away, the better. What lies behind that barrier needs to remain unseen.
Mr. Voharlik was not joking around. Whatever was behind that door was something that I was better off not knowing about. I promised him I wouldn't peek behind the forbidden barrier and only focus on the cleaning. The rule was simple enough. I thought that if I could block out the fear that the subway tunnels awoke in me, then keeping my curiosity about the door would be a piece of urinal cake. If only it were that easy. The question of the door didn't start properly tugging at my attention until the end of the first night. For a while, I even forgot that there was a mysterious door to begin with. I just moved through Smíchovské Nádraží with a sense of cosmic calm, enjoying the citrus-scented tranquility that my job provided. But when I reached the patch of dirty tile in front of the forbidden door, my zen state faded away like soap bubbles in stale water. The door was unlike any other door at the station. It was stronger, newer, shinier. I needed to know what was on the other side. But I reminded myself that a true janitor doesn't require knowledge of anything but himself. I reminded myself that people often get lost in speculation and worries and memories of the past. I reminded myself that none of those things mattered. I closed my eyes and grabbed my mop. The floor of my soul was covered with the muddy questions about the nature of the door. But those were questions I was not destined to get answers to. Those were questions that needed to be wiped away. I took a deep breath and moved my mop back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The possibilities of what could be hiding behind the steel door still chipped away at my concentration, but by the time the first subway rumbled in, the station was clean and I was free to go home. First nights were always the hardest, I convinced myself. Going forward, I would be able to remind myself that I had resisted the pull of the unknown once, and that would give me the strength to do it again. I thought that the lure of the forbidden would become a manageable part of my workday, that things would get better from that point onward. I was wrong. The first night at Smíchovské Nádraží was a sea of tranquility compared to what was to come. To my disappointment, the temptation was still there on the following night. It took significant mental energy and more deep breaths than I cared to admit, but I managed to clean the floor outside of that elusive steel passageway without looking up. With the patch of tiling that neighbored my obsession out of the way, I moved over to the other side of the station, hoping that being further away from the door would soothe my mind. It didn't. Within half an hour, my mop had made a direct line through the station back to the steel temptation. Yet as I arrived at the forbidden door, something gave me pause. In the freshly cleaned tiles, the same tiles that I had desperately scrubbed away while trying to ignore the burning curiosity in the pit of my stomach, was a set of muddy footprints. They led directly to the door. I dipped my mop in my bucket and prepared to wipe up the mysterious grime, but before my arms could push the mop across the footsteps, they revolted. I found myself touching the handle of the door. Without thinking, I pressed down. For 2 nights, the promise of entering the door had haunted me, but I never checked if it was unlocked. Even if I wanted to enter the forbidden passage, I couldn't. It was locked. I took a deep breath and tried not to be angry with myself. My lapse of self-control was in the past, and the only thing that mattered for a clean mind was the present. I cleared my head of all thoughts, put down my mop, and moved it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The usual rays of the morning sun were nowhere to be found when I emerged from the station. Dark clouds had gathered above Prague. A thick, frigid rain was cleansing the streets. As I shivered in the cold, waiting for my bus home, the question of the footsteps kept my jaw clenched. I needed to know. There was no tranquility the next night. I found my mind wandering constantly. The amount of cleaning that would take me an hour on a good day dragged out into half of my shift. The thoughts came with aggressive regularity. Every time I found my mind on the edge of the quietude that had become my steady companion for the past 3 years, the questions would emerge. What was behind that door? Who had dirtied the tiles of the station with their footsteps? Why was I not allowed to investigate? It was as if someone was running through my soul with a wastebasket full of shredded secret documents. I was a janitor. I was meant to clean them away and do my job, but I was also human. I wanted to sort through all the garbage and construct an image that was not meant for my eyes. After what felt like an eternity of waging a war with myself, I finally caved in. I decided on a compromise. The patch of tile outside of the door deserved an extra wash, and while I was there, I could indulge in a bit of investigation. Entering the door was forbidden, but Mr. Voralik never said anything about listening to what was on the other side. When I arrived with my mop and bucket, there was another set of footsteps leading to the door. I didn't even bother cleaning them up. Leaving my soapy bucket behind, I tiptoed over to the door and pressed my ear against it. I desperately hoped that getting a hint of what could be on the other side would satiate me, that I could return back to my calm job with a morsel of information safely in the pocket of my suspenders. But that hope was misguided. The cold surface of the door revealed nothing. I stood there for longer than I would care to admit. I even started mopping a bit, one hand keeping my ear company against the door, and the other limply pushing the mop around to justify my obsession. I would have made for quite the amusing sight. Just as my sense of self-respect started to gnaw at me, something else stopped my eavesdropping. Footsteps. Nearby footsteps. By the time I looked up, I could see him. A young man in blue overalls was making his way towards the door. There was a blank expression on his face, as if he was a man who fell asleep in uniform and was roaming the streets in a sleepwalking trance. "Oh, hello, In a fit of confusion, I pointed to my mop. "Just the janitor trying to figure out if anything behind that door needs cleaning." The man in the overalls didn't acknowledge me. Wordlessly, he walked past me, opened the door, and entered the dark unknown beyond. All that he left behind was a set of footsteps wet from the rain outside. I wish I could say that I remembered Mr. Voherlik's solemn face, or that I thought about cleaning up the trail that the quiet stranger had left behind. But I didn't. Without a second thought, I shoved my mop into the closing door and entered that dark hallway. It took my eyes a couple seconds to adjust to the dimness of the corridor, but his footsteps were easy to follow. I held onto my mop tight. If the man asked me what I was doing behind the forbidden door, I planned on feigning ignorance and playing the role of the innocent janitor who was just looking for things to clean. But the man never turned around. He never questioned me following him. He simply made his way down the hallway. The comforting scent of my cleaning supplies was gone. Now a smell of burnt food lingered in the air. A freight elevator stood at the end of the hallway. Its floor looked like it wasn't washed for a month, if ever. "Really dirty floor. Good thing I'm a janitor," I said, hoping to strike up a conversation. The man ignored me and ordered the elevator to move. With a rusty groan, we descended below Smíchovské Nádraží. I thought of my bucket sitting outside of the forbidden door, alone, a piece of evidence of my rule breaking. As the freight elevator descended, I promised myself I would return to it as soon as I could. I also promised myself I would mine as much information from the strange stranger to ensure I wouldn't abandon my bucket again. "So, if a humble janitor may ask, where is this elevator going?" The man didn't respond. He remained at the elevator controls, as if I didn't exist at all. I am not an angry person. Whenever I find myself frustrated, I just imagine whatever is irritating me as a particularly dirty staircase. It might take some time to restore the stairs to their intrinsic cleanliness, but with enough calm mopping, the problem will disappear. Yet as I stood there in that elevator, the strands of my mop caked in grime, I had no patience for staircases. "You know, it's really rude to pretend someone doesn't exist. I'm just a friendly janitor trying to make conversation. The least you could do is acknowledge me," I said with considerably more anger than I had anticipated. This time the man did respond, but he didn't speak. He whimpered. Like a dirty puppy stuck under a bridge, the man whimpered. There were tears in his eyes. "Sorry for yelling," I said, feeling bad about my outburst. Before I had a chance to ask him if he was okay, the elevator grinded to a halt. As the doors creaked open, the smell of smoke strengthened to an almost unbreathable degree. Distinct memories of sitting on the wrong side of a bonfire lingered in the back of my skull, but they were swiftly crushed under the vision of the underground hellscape. There were other people wearing blue overalls. Men and women, young and old. They all picked away at a long assembly line of rusted metal. Unlike the strangers' clothes, their uniforms were filthy, tattered, and in places caked in dark splotches of red. The workers all looked as if something primal was drained from them, as if they were simply puppets that had any semblance of humanity replaced with an utter dedication to the sorting of metal on the assembly line. Yet as they worked, one trace of human emotion remained. They wept. All the workers in the factory openly wept. Soon I found out why. I didn't even register the stranger leaving. As soon as I saw the horrid contraption at the end of the hall, my hand was slamming on the elevator to go back up, to leave, to rid me of the harrowing sight of the machine. When the metal doors screeched to a close, I could see the stranger joining the procession of weeping labor. His whimpering cracked into pained wailing, and then he was gone. I did not feel sorry for him. I could not feel sorry for him. My mind was wholly occupied by the searing image of the machine. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath through my shuddering lungs. I imagined I was holding a mop in the hallway of my soul. I swept it across the dirt, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That maw, that horrible blazing, toothed mouth of flame. I knew it was right below me, its flames reaching out into the world beyond, needing, craving, demanding more fuel for the inferno that raged in the machine's metal shell. I tried to remind myself that we are all the janitors of our own mind, that we get to choose the cleanliness of our spirit, That worries are just bits of dirty tile that we can move a mop across, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All that I could smell was smoke. All that I could hear were the cries of the tortured masses. All that I could imagine was being in that line of lost souls, wearing those filthy blue overalls, weeping. I kept my eyes closed. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that every problem, every obstacle, every bit of mental debris can be dealt with. All it would take was patience. All that it would take was for me to move my mop back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. By the time the freight elevator reached its destination, the bristles of my mop had turned to pitch black. I usually care about the state of my equipment, but I didn't then. All I wanted to do was to get as far away as possible from that infernal sight. The mop turned my bucket the color of the darkest night. Once I caught my breath, once I had made enough peace with what burns beneath Smíchovské Nádraží to get my legs back under my control, I emptied out the bucket and refilled it with fresh water. It took 3 more buckets and a good helping of my sanitation supplies to make the mop clean enough to use, but the images that have been seared into my mind still burnt with a stifling intensity. Mr. Voralik was right to warn me. What exists beyond that door was never meant to be seen. But now that it has been seen, now that I am aware of the horrible contraption hidden beneath Smíchovské Nádraží, I find myself at a loss of what to do. The best idea I had was to chronicle my story in this sleepless corner of the internet, to hope that someone could explain why such a horrible machine would exist. But I know that what I have seen is beyond explanation. The inner world of my soul is a burning garbage fire. Every thought that I have is shrouded in the smoke from that horrible contraption. I do not know how to carry on, but I know that I have to. My mind is a prison of white-hot, jagged metal, yet I still have a job to do. I have been in the Prague janitorial service for 3 years, and I have never left a station unclean. I just have to close my eyes and take a deep breath. Some doors are meant to remain locked. Some questions are meant to remain unanswered. There's enough mystery in the world to drive any janitor insane, but even in a universe of chaos, a clean mind can still exist. The floors of my soul are covered in black grime, and my head spins with the memories of the stifling smoke. But I have control over my spirit. It might take a long time. It might take a lot of effort. But with enough focus and enough effort, a clean mind can be achieved. All I need to do is take my mop and move it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And hopefully, one day, I will escape the visions of the machine.
I try to reach out. I try to tell others. I try to tell the world about the horrible images that fill my newsfeed when no one is looking, but all I am met with is silence. Every picture is a 404 error. Every video stays in obscurity. Every Reddit post lingers on a solitary upvote. I have been shadow banned from the global forum of ideas, and in my digital darkness, no one can hear my pleas. No one can heed my warnings. The algorithm has muffled my cries for help. We're in a bar. The air is filled with smoke and cologne and music. My friend is convinced that the bartender is flirting with him, but really, she's flirting with everyone. It's her job. Nevertheless, I try to play along with his misguided search for affection. I try to make small talk about the shared media bubble we both once lived in. I try to act normal, but I don't last long. Have you noticed something off about your newsfeed? I ask. He barely registers my question. Before considering it, he mumbles something about the bartender's breasts, but a drunken birthday party drowns out the details of his comments. He continues to sip on his Long Island while undressing her with his eyes. There's something wrong with my newsfeed, I say, pulling out my phone.
Huh?
He drags his attention away from her and makes eye contact with me for the first time in the evening.
What sort of wrong?
I get past the lock screen and register my hands shaking. I can't explain any of it, but in the depth of my core, I know that the images that drift through my smartphone are wrong. I know that I have stumbled upon something forbidden, something that human eyes cannot comprehend. There's these videos of... My voice dies in my throat. It's happening again. It's as if my phone knows that I'm reaching out. It's as if it's aware of an extra pair of eyes looking over my shoulder. I impotently scroll through the torrent of information, desperately clawing at the screen with my thumbs, searching for the glimpses of a demented reality that haunts me on sleepless nights. But there is nothing. My newsfeed is filled with articles about how modern democracy is dying, and memes about 2020 being a bad year.
Aye, the post office stuff.
My friend smiles, focusing on a particularly alarming NPR article.
Yeah. I really hope that the Yanks figure their stuff out. Wouldn't want this place falling back under Russian ownership.
No, it's not that, I protest. It's the videos, the machine videos, the videos of the factory, the videos of the fire. Past the dim light fixtures, past the thick cloud of cigarette smoke, past the drunkenness, I can see his eyes struggle with what I'm saying.
Newsfeeds are weird, bro. Last month, all the ads I got were for an IVF clinic. Like, what did I do to make the computer think I want kids, let alone spend a boatload of cash on a test tube baby?
He raises his drink.
Would happily chuck one in our oven though, eh?
He says, nodding to the bartender. We clink glasses, he downs his drink and sets off on a quest to harass someone from the service industry. He's not the first person I tried telling, but as I watch him perform coin tricks at the bar to the annoyance of the other patrons, I realize he's the last one. Everyone has their own story of a strange media diet. Everyone thinks they can relate. Everyone says that this is just a strange hiccup in the algorithm that will pass. For the longest time, I tried convincing myself that that's exactly what all this was. That I've fallen down some crooked binary rain gutter of information and that in a couple of weeks I would re-emerge unscathed. But self-deception cannot deny the burning fear in my stomach. The never-ending assembly line, those jagged pieces of rusted metal, that starving steel maw. The memories of those cursed images make it impossible to finish my beer. I call an Uber. It's 2 a.m, but my driver has the pep of someone who's woken up from a good night's sleep. He asked me how my night went, how the beer tasted, whether there were any pretty girls at the bar. Soon enough, the conversation dies off and we're left with the rumbling of the radio. An old man raves about how the coalition is selling off the country's future by throwing money at pensioners. They're trying to bribe their way into a re-election. As we ride through the lamplit Gothic streets of Prague, I start scrolling through my phone. At first, there's nothing. My fingers run through the same torrent of humble brags and sponsored content they have been dragging over for years. But as the road calms, from cobblestone to asphalt, the virtual phantoms that have been haunting me start to materialize. Right below the status update, where my old karate classmate from grade school muses on about the benefits of a white ethno-state, I see it. I see the evidence of something horrible. A factory. The lights are dim. The assembly line stretches out beyond sight. Rusty pieces of metal travel down the conveyor belt in an endless procession of broken shapes. Blistered hands pick up the shards and inspect them. Gentle sobs are heard. The workers of the factory weep as they slave away at their hellish task. Their tears cut through the grime on their face, revealing pale skin. You need to see this. I break the silence.
Huh?
The driver gives me a quick glance before turning his attention back to the traffic light. A flash of green sends the car moving forward. He keeps his eyes on the road. A polite smile forces its way across his lips.
What do I need to see?
Their eyes stare back at me from the screen. These are no actors. These are people trapped in some horrid ritual. They are pleading for help. They are begging to be saved. This! I yell. You need to see this! I grab the driver's shoulder and shove the phone in his face. The car bounces as we spin onto the sidewalk. It's a busy road. If it wasn't 2 a.m, we'd both be dead.
All right, you drunk asshole,
he says, all pretense of politeness crackling out of his voice.
You'll either go sit in the back seat, shut the hell up, and let me do my job, or you can walk.
I'm not drunk. The words stumble out of my mouth with enough nervousness to suggest otherwise. You just need to see this. The screen of my phone is black. I try to tap away. I try to find those suffering eyes again, but the technology refuses to cooperate with me. The driver's knuckles tighten around the wheel.
Is there going to be a problem?
There isn't. I get out of the car and move to the back seat. I stew in an alcohol-laced state of shame and fear for the next 5 minutes. When we reach my apartment, I limply hold out 100 crowns as a tip.
Screw your cigarette money. You almost kill us both. And don't think I won't make a complaint.
He says without looking back. I make my way through the dark apartment complex. It wasn't always like this. Less than 3 months ago, I consumed the same highlight reel of other people's lives and article headlines that everyone else did. Relatable skits, engagement photos, panicked bar charts about the decline of civilization, Tiger King memes. There was nothing differentiating my digital diet from my friends. But slowly, through hungover mornings and tired subway scrolls, something changed. At first there was an influx of home crafting videos. Then all knowledge of my friends' lives got replaced with footage of car factories and assembly lines constructing household appliances, and then, among the heaps of mechanized content, I started to see glimpses of it. I tried sending links, I tried posting about it, I tried to figure out if there was someone else within my social circle who was witnessing the transformation, but any attempt to discuss the videos drifted off into small talk about the strangeness of modern media. For a while I tried to make peace with it, to simply accept that my newsfeed was filled up with strange weeping workers in grimy overalls, but then I saw the machine. A skyscraper of rugged metal hidden in an inconceivably spacious den. The exhausted laborers, the never-ending assembly line, they all served the insatiable jaws of the machine. To even think about it tightens my chest. To imagine that somewhere in this world, this titan of a creation exists makes each breath that I take difficult to accept. Yet as soon as I get home, I crash down into my couch, take out my phone, and watch the feeding frenzy of the lifeless idol. A feeling of finality courses through my veins. As I stare into the pitch-black tunnel of the contraption's mouth, I cannot look away. The machine has snared me in its call to action. Somewhere deep inside, I know that one day soon, I will don those blue overalls and sacrifice my life to a god I cannot comprehend. The soundscape of the factory has always been simple. Nothing but the noises of metal grinding against metal and the quiet whimpers of the workers. But suddenly, a blaring siren cuts through the speakers. The strained artificial cry sends the workers scattering from the structure like ants. They panic, they scream, they sprint away in a mad dash to save their lives. An old man who has been attending to one of the razor-sharp teeth of the contraption struggles to get away. His hand seems to have gotten stuck between the metal. It isn't until all the other workers have fled that he pries his bleeding hand from its jaws. He hobbles. His screams struggle to be heard over the siren, his bloody hand leaving a crooked path towards the horror. The old man battles with his frail body to escape, but when the siren of the factory goes silent, he stops. A look of resignation breaks through the terror in his face. He knows what's about to happen. And for some inconceivable reason, so do I. Somewhere in the depth of my core, I feel a glimpse of foresight. It's as if my ancestors saw what is about to happen and they are whispering the future into my ear in their primitive tongues. It's as if the images on the screen have been baked into the pure genetics of my being, as if the machine was an inevitable part of sentient life. The old man turns to face the towering monstrosity. I hear my own heartbeat. Deep in the lifeless god's throat, a bright spark shimmers in the dark and turns into a blinding flame. Like claws, the fire reaches out to the world, grasping for oxygen. The old man ceases to exist. Inferno rages on in its mammoth metal shell. For a split second, I start to register the burning heat pressing against my fingers, but before I can let go of my phone, something else grips my attention. In the fire, in the chaotic mess of chemical energy reaching out into the world, I see two blue burning balls of light. They see me. And then, they're gone. The towering mouth of the machine goes dark. All that remains of the fire are the hot white teeth of the contraption and the old man's ashes. The grinding of metal returns. The wailing of the workers becomes audible once more. I feel the tears crawling across my cheeks. In a sudden burst of sanity, I throw my scorching phone across the room and go out to my balcony. There are images in my head that I cannot explain. It's as if someone broke my skull open and forced thoughts of an imminent journey into my head. I can see myself getting into an unmarked van. I can feel the soft leather of the seats. I can smell the faint memory of bleach in my blue overalls. These thoughts are not my own. I reach deep into my soul and get rid of them. The night air gives me a semblance of sanity. After wiping away my unexplainable tears, the wind feels good on my sweaty face. I convince myself that what I just saw, what I just felt, was just a momentary lapse of sanity. A little mental breakdown that everyone goes through from time to time and never talks about. The lighter in my pocket touches on the dread in my stomach, but I fight the fear and light up a cigarette. The nicotine steadies me further. The Soviet-era housing projects that I live inside of are in near darkness, yet scattered through the dozens of concrete architectural monstrosities, I see other burning lights. There are other people on their balconies, smoking, unable to sleep. For a second I feel safe in the idea that I'm not alone in my dread, that in front of me there is a lit-up mosaic of other men and women struggling. But soon, my eyes drift to another source of light. It moves silently past the road below me, past all the recycling cans and parked cars. A pair of bright headlights goes dark as soon as they reach my house. A black van, a familiar black van, waits outside of my home. Its doors slide open. I put out my cigarette.
There's a good chance that no one will see this post. But if another human is listening to this, then I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I know no amount of apologies can fix the damage that I've inflicted upon the world, but I want you to know that from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. If there was anything that I could do, if I could sacrifice my life to offset all the harm that I've brought into this world, I would do so without hesitation, but the monster that I've helped create is far too powerful to be stopped. There's no way back. If this brings you any pleasure, me recording this confession is without a doubt going to lead to my death. My employer does not take kindly to people interfering with his plans, and he has enough wealth and power to ensure those who cross him don't survive to talk about it. A part of me knows that even this post is not destined to survive in the public record for long. Any piece of media referencing the machine, or anything even remotely tied to it, is going to trigger a dozen keyword alarms. The algorithms are going to bury my warning in a sea of other posts and ensure that any damage I could cause to the system is negligible. But the least I can do is try to warn you of what I've created. For most of my adult life, I've worked with social media to interfere in elections, to manipulate the stock market. My clients have ranged from insatiable investors to brutal despots. I've sown seeds of panic and rage all across the world, but nothing compares to the carnage that my most recent employer required me to put into motion. For the past 5 years, I've worked in social media recruitment for a death cult. My team was given instructions to design a content funnel for users to fall through in order to generate recruits. With some light adjustments to people's news feeds and a couple months of exposure, we could convert just about anyone into a servant of the machine. I cannot stop the machine. I cannot prevent the flames that it will bring into the world, but I hope that with detailing the nature of the system we designed, I can save someone. There are 6 steps that the system goes through during the recruitment process. If any of this sounds familiar, I implore you, put down your phone, stay off of social media, and enjoy what little time you have left before my employer's plan comes into fruition. Number 1, isolate the user. Happy people seldom make for good cult recruits. The first step of the content funnel is to chip away at one of the biggest predictors of life satisfaction, the feeling of belonging. Making the user feel alienated was a two-pronged approach, relying solely on the type of content that we would allow the user to see and the type of content which we would scrub from their social media presence. Over the span of a couple of weeks, we would ensure that the user's regular feed of other people's lives would exclusively consist of one of the brightest highlight reels. Engagements, babies, new homes, personal triumphs. The system knows when something is being celebrated. With a couple of adjustments, we would ensure that the user's digital path would exclusively lead through festivals of personal triumphs and milestones of a life well lived. If the user were to decide to add their own achievement to the carnival of success, the second function of our isolation algorithm would come into play. The system knows when something is being celebrated. It would ensure that whatever successes the user had to share with the world would be shared quietly. Throwing parties that no one comes to makes a person feel alone and cut off from the rest of their community. Cults feed on loneliness. Adjusting content prioritization to manipulate emotional states isn't a completely novel idea. Back in 2014, a group of researchers tested out various algorithms on nearly 700,000 unsuspecting Facebook users to study their altered emotional states. When the media caught wind of the experiment, they created a firestorm that lasted for almost a week, before everyone calmed down with non-committal promises to never do it again. Sometimes I wonder what it would have looked like if our operation were uncovered in the early days. Our reach was much broader than a measly 700,000 users, and we would do worse things than just make people sad. We did considerably worse things. Number 2, remind the user of their fragility. With the seeds of doubt that the user has done something wrong with their life planted in their head, the system would move on to the second phase, to remind the user that their body is fragile. The type of content that we used for individual users differed wildly. Some were prone to envy and reacted strongly to mountain bike videos through dangerous slopes or impressive physical feats they could never achieve, whilst others were more reactive to videos of violence, photographs of deadly accidents, and other assorted bits of gore. Either way, the aim was simple: to ensure that the user is reminded how delicate and easily breakable their body is. Their digital footprint would let the system know how to best get the information across. There was only one type of media that my employer wouldn't allow to appear on potential recruits' feeds: workplace accidents involving heavy machinery. Any sort of content that would tie factories to pain was strictly forbidden. Working on the machine wasn't meant to be associated with pain. It was meant to bring salvation. Number 3, pivot the user's interests to manual labor. With the user both doubting the usefulness of their body and their role in society, the system would transition to the next stage, pivoting the user's interest towards manual labor. Crafting videos would be the most common newsfeed fodder, but there were sizable populations of users that reacted better to do-it-yourself home construction projects or weapon restoration videos. Either way, the aim was undivided: to stress the importance of work done with the user's hands and to set the stage for the factory videos. An unprompted video of a car factory might seem out of place on a regular newsfeed, but when it's positioned snugly between instructions on how to make a battle axe at home and footage of a group of boys digging out a swimming pool in the jungle, a factory video doesn't seem too suspicious. The system would be patient. It would only slide in the industrial videos if it knew most users wouldn't notice. Over weeks and months, the system would start to plug in compilations of factory videos into the user's newsfeed. Footage of heavy machinery became the standard for their digital existence. Through those videos, a path was forged towards showing the potential recruit the machine. Step 4. Make the user aware of the work being done for the machine. People don't scroll on their phones at peak intellectual capacity. They scroll when they're hungover on the back of an Uber. They scroll when they're trying to avoid conversation at a bus stop or when they're trying to fall asleep. No one's brain is working overtime. The user's barely aware of what's on the screen anyway. They're just taking in some mental junk food before returning back to real life. Their guard isn't up. Their minds are malleable. After a couple of weeks, they'd stop questioning the factory videos. There is, after all, something mighty pleasing about watching repetitive mechanized work. There's a sense of satisfaction that those videos provide. They'd sit back and consume hours of scattered factory footage a week, and then, when the system could be sure that they are in a docile state and not around anyone else, it would show them the work being done for the machine. Bored on a couch, half listening to a movie, the user would pull out their phone. They'd scroll through their newsfeed and stumble upon another one of the factory compilation videos. Footage from a toothpaste factory, a person speed-weaving blankets, a shot of a man in sweaty blue overalls cleaning the metal rods that are heading towards the machine. More footage from a toothpaste factory. The system would throw in just a quick little glimpse of the horror and gauge the user's reaction. If they didn't question anything, if they just consumed, the system would throw in another glimpse in the morning. Shots of machines attaching screws to wheels, face masks being stitched together and thrown onto a big pile, tears cutting through the soot as the workers in blue overalls slave away for the machine, footage of donuts being filled up with jelly. Thoughts of the machine would snake their way into the user's head. They'd find themselves grasping at vague memories of some metal monstrosity demanding more offerings, but they wouldn't have the faintest idea of where those images came from. The system would continue its onslaught, slowly showing more and more and more with each video. Skateboards being painted by a spray gun, the hoarse howling of the workers, cigarette packs being filled in, the blistered hands worshipping the machine through their labor, rice being measured and packaged, the never-ending assembly line of rusted metal for the machine, the wails, the screams, the pain, stacks of the newest smartphone being shipped in absurdly sized boxes. On a long enough time scale, the exposure to the videos would alert even the most docile of users. By then, they were already within the grasp of my employer. It was only a matter of time before they would join the brutal labor done for the machine. All that was needed from the system was damage control. Step 5. Isolate the user's pleas for help. The user finds themselves at a bar with some friends. The strange videos that appear in their newsfeed worry them, but they figure they'll keep it to themselves, unless there's an appropriate lull in conversation. After a couple of beers, that lull begins. The user leaps at the opportunity to speak, to describe the discomforting videos they've been seeing on their newsfeed. This catches people's attention. They want to see the alluring carnage. The user takes out their phone. They're met with nothing but cooking videos. Pictures of pets and essays about transcendental hiking trips. The user scrolls, telling everyone gathered that the videos have to be there somewhere, but the longer they make everyone wait, the bigger the final disappointment is. Regardless of how much the potential recruit insists the videos are real, no videos of the machine manifest. There's enough data about other phones floating through the air to let the system know when the user's not alone. A front-facing camera also helps. So let's say the user lets the issue of the machine go for the night. But when he goes back home, he finds that nothing has changed. The wails of the workers still ring through his dark bedroom. He can see glimpses of the machine beckoning him through the rest of his digital diet. So let's say the user reaches out to the internet in search of help. Let's say he posts a screenshot of one of the exhausted laborers working on the machine out into the sea of screens. Deprioritizing content was easier than deleting it. That way, the user's left with the impression that hundreds of people saw his plea for help and simply decided to ignore it. confused, demoralized, and doubting their own sanity. That was exactly the state of mind which my employer demanded from his potential recruits. Step 6. Retrieve the user. Up until this morning, my knowledge on the final step of the recruitment process was limited. It was limited by design. My employer paid for a system that degraded the mental health of the masses, while also providing a specific set of subconscious stimuli. The final product was not in my team's purview. Our final order was to deliver a specific video to the user's feed and broadcast their current location to a retrieval team. Knowing the nature of the video was not a part of the job description, my employer forbade anyone on the team to look into the video files under threat of violence. We knew he wasn't joking. We knew what people like him are capable of. Nobody pushed the question further. We just did our jobs and collected our paychecks. There was no doubt in my heart that the system we designed was morally abhorrent. We were funneling broken people towards some secret cult after all, but it wasn't until yesterday that I realized the full extent of what my work for the machine meant. It was the end of the day. There was a vacation looming just a couple of hours away. I couldn't wait to get out of the office and not think about algorithms for at least a week. That's when I found the video. Through absent-mindedly clicked folders, I stumbled into a corner of the system that I was not meant to see. One moment I was drinking cold coffee and thinking about what I needed to pack for my flight, and then suddenly, none of it mattered. Staring into that screen, I knew that nothing else would ever matter again. Fires, by their very nature, are hypnotic. You sit back at the bonfire and watch the flames lick the night sky. You lose yourself in the flicker of a candle over dinner. There's just something in the raw energy of the flames that draws you in. I've never really thought about that feeling before, but it's the only way that I can describe what was on that screen. From my desktop monitor, a hypnotic fire burned. Yet where watching a crackling fireplace is a gentle tug on one's attention, the fire on my screen was a stranglehold. Everything else in the world disappeared. It was just me and the flames. Even the rest of the video was difficult to make out. It was filmed in some sort of factory. There was a metal structure containing the blaze. It looked like a giant mouth. But none of that mattered. All that mattered were the flames. They burnt with furious zeal. They demanded more air, more fuel, more of my attention. My mind was completely blank. All I could do was focus. All I could do was look into the heart of the fire. It pulsated with energy, throbbing, growing bigger, growing wilder. The fire raged on and on. Its flames reached further and further, but deep in the center of the inferno, two blue specks of light flickered into existence. They were looking straight at me. As the fire continued to rage, those balls of light grew. I saw something in that fire, and it saw me. A barrage of foreign thoughts seared across my brain, stinging pain, like that of a migraine. But this migraine had words. Within those sharp stings, there was knowledge. There was a machine below the earth where I would find salvation. There was a machine below the earth, and it demanded my presence. It demanded my hands and my tears and my work, and one day it would burn the world. One day it would burn the world, and the God that dwells within the fire would purify my soul. Suddenly reality was back. I was alone in my office. My fist had knocked the monitor off the table. Where there was once a fire, there was just a broken screen, struggling between darkness and a stream of white pixels. My head, it still throbbed with the thoughts that those blue balls of light forced into my mind, but as I started to piece things together, another source of discomfort took my attention. Something was festering in the pit of my stomach. I had helped build a system that prepared people for that video. Even unprompted, the images on that screen nearly broke me. The damage that it would do to someone who was conditioned for months to take in the message that those blue eyes carried it sent the cold coffee tumbling out of my stomach into the wastebasket. My employer was building a machine that would unleash a horrible power beyond human comprehension and burn the world to mountains of ash. And I had helped him. I had brought him countless recruits to work on this demented task. I was responsible for the machine. In an attempt to rid myself of the guilt, I gathered all the data I could find. I put together every breadcrumb of information about the recruits that were still on the servers. I backed up the entire system for evidence. I found the location that the recruits were being sent to. All of that information was backed up on a drive to use as evidence. Then I fled the country. I thought I could help. Any journalist, any law firm, any self-respecting government could take this information and prevent the machine from ever burning again. I was going to find a quiet cafe somewhere and send out the evidence to as many news outlets and agencies as I could. I thought that undoing the damage was possible. Yet now, as I sit here in a dingy internet cafe in Berlin, all my hopes have gone up in flames. The hard drive is empty. I was careful when I copied those files. I thought I was saving the whole world from a fiery death, but the hard drive is completely empty. I have no evidence of the machine except for my word, and there's an entire system designed to make sure no crowd will ever hear me speak. So I came here, to a corner of the web where I might at least help a soul or two escape from the machine's clutches. I came here in the hopes of easing my guilt. If you see any factory videos on your newsfeed, put your phone away. Put your phone away and try to enjoy as much of your life as you can. Be kind to yourself. Bring joy to others. Do whatever makes you happy, because one day soon, this will all end. My employer's project will be finished. The contraption beneath the ground will spark to life, and we will all burn in the roaring flames of the machine. It's 2010. I'm on an island that I can't pronounce, and I'm surrounded by rich people who I've never heard of. And they all want to talk to me. An unwinnable election in a mineral-rich country was just won, and they want to know how I did it. Everyone wants a peek of the college dropout who swayed politics with his laptop. The offers I hear are astronomical. The value they place on an hour of my time are more than my criminal father made in a year. Significantly more. At the end of the evening, when the guests start to leave and my head is spitting with too much gin, I get taken to the host's study. Nobody saw him during the party, and as I talk to him, he remains invisible in a cloak of shadows. His voice is low and raspy. He asks direct questions. The man is more knowledgeable on the potential of social media manipulation than everyone I have spoken to that night combined. He makes me an offer I couldn't conceive of in my wildest dreams. Without hesitation, I accept.
I trust,
the man says, his voice straining.
I trust that you have the capacity to imagine what will happen if you ever tell anyone about this meeting.
From the darkness, I can make out the outlines of a disfigured face. It's not until I'm sitting in my hotel room that I realize I had just spoken to the most powerful man on Earth. 10 years later, I'm sitting in an internet cafe in Berlin. A group of teens are yelling at each other in some Slavic tongue while they shoot down terrorists on their screens, and a bald giant with the face of a hammerhead clicks back and forth between his emails and hardcore pornography in the corner. And I have just posted my confession. I used social media manipulation to recruit members for a death cult. There's still 40 minutes worth of internet on the computer that I paid for. I consider posting something else, doing something, anything, to drag more attention towards the nature of my crimes, but I don't. The more noise I make, the more likely they are to notice. A quiet post might save a couple people. A viral post will get wiped before it reaches a proper audience. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I just hoped the ex-Catholic in me would appreciate the chance at a confession, that letting the world know would ease at least a fraction of my guilt. But it didn't. In my broken German, I let the cafe owner know that I'm only leaving for a cigarette and that I will be right back. The owner barely registers me. But the bald man with the face of a frenzied shark watches me as I leave. I can feel his eyes burrow into me as I round the corner, and as soon as I'm out of sight, I sprint to the train station. I felt safe in the internet cafe. There were no cameras in there. The chances of my old employer tracking me down were minimal. The Berlin Hauptbahnhof is different. I'm surrounded by a sea of lenses. Even as I try to hide my face, even as I try to stick in the bustling crowds, I know that if my old employers are looking for me, they'll find me if I stick around too long. I pay a vagrant to buy me a train ticket into Prague. I reward him with the credit card I used at the internet cafe, and for the 10 minutes before my train arrives, I sit and watch the lively station from the shadows. I wonder if I just sign that poor youth's death warrant. I try to convince myself that he'll be fine, but as I get on the train, I stop lying to myself. I know that I've signed the death warrant of every single person in that station. Once the train leaves the city, I'm left with a picturesque view of a German countryside, reddened by the setting sun. The teenage girl sitting opposite me snaps pictures of the shining vistas on her smartphone. Nature has never been my forte, but as I sit there, as the sun seeps into our compartment through the trees, I can't help but find it beautiful. The countryside is beautiful, and yet it'll burn. Everything will burn. Everything will burn because of decisions I've made. We enter a tunnel. The stunning vista turns into a black mirror. Unable to look at myself, I look over at the girl sitting opposite me. She's staring down into her phone with a look of confusion. Through the reflection of the mirror, I can see what's on her screen. It's the videos. Fevered visions of a factory, weeping workers, a horrible metal maw. My work has crossed her newsfeed. I try to push back the need to warn her. I try to convince myself that a single person doesn't matter, that she won't believe me anyway, but as the train rushes out of the tunnel, I find myself speaking. In my broken German, I tell her that she's being brainwashed by a cult, that her social media have been hijacked by people who mean her harm, that if she doesn't resist, she will end up in the same horrible factory she sees in the videos. She doesn't understand. Other people in the compartment are looking at me. I've drawn too much attention to myself. With a final word of warning, I grab my coat and go sit in a different compartment. A sane man in my position wouldn't go to Prague. A sane man would fly out to some tropic paradise, lounge in the sun, dine on exotic food, and spend his last days on Earth in hedonic comfort. When I first made the decision to turn on my employers, I thought about it. But the thought was short-lived. My pasty skin wells up in direct sunlight, and exotic food churns my stomach. No. Instead of enjoying my ill-found wealth, I made a decision to get closer to the monster I created. Something in the core of my being told me that if I was to make any amount of penance, I would have to be close to the machine when it roared to life. I would have to feel the flames of the fire that I had set the kindling for. The train explodes with activity as soon as we reach Prague's main train station. The tourists, the students, the out-of-town workers, they all flood out into the metal enclosure of the terminal. I stay seated. I convince myself there are far too many cameras inside the station, that the police presence outside is far too much of a risk. But I know I have other reasons to stay on the train. Everyone has departed, but there's one more station left. Smíchovské Nádraží is the ugly stepsister of Prague's main train station. It lacks any real historical context, has generally been forgotten during the post-communist reconstructions, and is far enough from the center to be virtually irrelevant. If it weren't connected to the subway line, it probably would have been shut down decades ago. The lax security systems suit me. I depart the train, safe in the knowledge that my chances of being followed are slim. As I walk through the station's dirty tile floors, however, I can't help but think about what's happening below my feet. Smíchovské Nádraží directly translates into the Station of Laughter. The name is said to originate from an old legend of a nobleman feigning his suicide by riding his horse off of a cliff right before his execution. They say that if you listen closely and the night is calm, you can still hear the nobleman's laughter echo through the streets. Those are tales for small children. If you were to listen closely to the sounds of the district, all you would hear would be the rumbling of trains and the drunken murmurs from the smokers outside of pubs. No. There's no laughter to be heard here. Yet perhaps, if you laid your head against those dirty tiles and the station descended into complete silence, you could hear something. You could hear the wailing of the workers slaving away at the machine. As I made my way down to the subway, I entertained the idea of searching for some hidden entrance, some way to get to the factory below, throwing myself onto the assembly line and being swallowed up by the demented contraption I helped build. Oh, that'd be a fitting end to my guilt, but I don't. I didn't come to Prague just for the machine. I came to say goodbye to the only part of my family I ever cared about. My nephew. Johnny's about the only good thing that ever came out of my bloodline. The kid was smarter than my thieving brother's genes would allow, but he barely passed high school. Johnny was a troubled kid, unsure of how to react to the roaring current of life, and was prone to bouts of helplessness. Unsure of what to do after graduation, it looked like the kid would end up spending the next couple of years working in his drunk father's auto shop. I wouldn't wish that fate on anyone. Feeling charitable, I offered to set the kid up wherever in the world he wanted to go. Johnny found his inner bohemian, took my money, and moved to Prague. At the time, it didn't seem to matter.
Uncle?
He answers the door. His face unshaven, his eyes red, and after a moment of shock wears off, he hugs me.
Why didn't you tell me you were coming to visit? Should have sent an email.
His t-shirt could use a wash, but a hug makes me forget about my worries. Can I come inside? I ask.
Yes, of course. It's just kind of a mess.
Kind of is putting it mildly. The apartment is buried in what looks to be the fallout of a bomb composed purely of dirty dishes and laundry. The kid offers me a coffee. It's the cheap stuff. The same stuff I used to drink back in college. It takes me back. He clears out space on the couch for me to sit, and for a second he hesitates over the bong on the table, but with a shrug he leaves it where it is and sits down in a chair covered in jackets.
So how have you been, Uncle? What are you up to these days? It's difficult to keep up with someone who doesn't have a Facebook account.
There's been a lot of work, I say. He nods in understanding. He doesn't know what I do, but he does know I keep my job secret and can't be on social media and make an absurd amount of money. I have a nagging suspicion he thinks I'm some sort of drug lord. How have you been? I ask. What are you doing these days, Johnny? Are you happy here?
Mixed bag, I guess. Made some friends, taking an online drawing course, thinking of picking up running soon, but...
He looks around the wreck of an apartment.
Still figuring stuff out.
Figuring stuff out. That's what your early 20s are for. The instant coffee tastes bitter, but memories of friends long gone linger in the back of my throat. What sort of friends do you have here, Johnny? He thinks. A conspiratorial smirk crosses his face, and the kid's voice drops down to a whisper.
I actually have some friends who are in the business.
The business? He nods towards the bong on the table.
The drug dealing business.
He says in a whisper so low that I'm left reading his lips. I consider the chances of the room being bugged. The chances aren't minimal, but I push the thought away. What sort of drugs, Johnny?
Oh, nothing serious. Just some pot, sometimes some hash. They're good people. Ex-Taliban.
You're friends with people from the Taliban?
Ex-Taliban or ex-ISIS, one of those. They're good guys. Headline here is the X part.
He says.
Originally came here to blow shit up and bring death to the godless Czechs, but this city has a habit of chilling people out.
For a split second, I contemplate whether financing the kids' move to Prague was a bad idea, but then I remember the meth heads that used to hang around my brother's car shop. Better here than there. And you said you started drawing?
Yeah.
He fishes out a smartphone and passes it to me.
Got a little portfolio on my Facebook page, but I also have some unreleased sketch work kicking around here. If you want to see it, I can go dig it out.
I'd love to see your art, Johnny. I say. That's all he needs to hear. Johnny passes me his phone and sets off on his excavation effort. My thumb instinctively slides over the front camera of the phone. It's been years since I held a smartphone. Knowing what those touchscreens are capable of makes one quite reluctant to touch them. Yet as I scroll through Johnny's art feed, the concept of an evil web of manipulation is replaced with the type of awe only good art can provide. I really like the one of the birds, I yell, as Johnny rummages around his bedroom for a sketchbook.
Oh yeah, based on a true story. Saw some guy getting chased by pigeons at the main train station and couldn't let go of the image, so I drew it.
There's enough clattering going on from the kid's bedroom to suggest it's twice as disorganized as his living room. I remember the messes that I made when I was his age. It's good work, Johnny, I say. The sketch is rough, but the fear in the man's eyes as the flock of pigeons descends on him is real. A twinge of pride swells in my heart at being even loosely connected to the existence of the drawing, but the feeling of pride quickly disappears. I scroll past my nephew's work and find some of mine. A sponsored video ad. A dark factory. A never-ending assembly line. The workers in blue overalls weep as they inspect pieces of rusted metal destined for the machine. I crack the phone screen in half. They told me they would leave my family out of it. They told me that as long as I kept loyal, they would keep them free of the system I designed.
Uncle?
He says, holding his coffee-stained sketchbook in his hands.
Is everything okay?
It's not. My chest tightens enough to make my knees weak. I feel the jagged pieces of a cracked screen dig into my hand. Johnny, I say, my voice strained with panic, have you noticed anything strange on your newsfeed recently? He looks down at the broken phone in his hands, but his eyes quickly drift to mine. He thinks,
well, actually, there's been strange factory videos showing up.
How long? How long have you been seeing the strange videos, Johnny?
I don't know. 3 days? Is something wrong, Uncle?
3 days. They knew almost instantaneously. They knew the moment I left the server room. They knew before I even started writing my confession. The room shrinks down into a stifling box filled with garbage.
Uncle?
I need air, I say as I stumble out onto the balcony. Johnny, poor, scrawny Johnny, could have ended up among the blue overall-clad masses that serve the machine. He could have been a part of the wailing procession below the lines of Smíchovské Nádraží. I would have been responsible. The Gothic city outside is lit up by bright lights, trams rumble on through the streets, neon signs advertise nightclubs and strip bars, people sit at the fluorescent bus stops waiting to get home. Everyone is scrolling. There's 1,000 scrawny boys just like Johnny who will end up slaving away for the infernal force beneath the city. Everything will burn. And it's my fault. I clutch the railings of the balcony, trying to gain some semblance of stability, but none comes. The kid stands next to me, quiet, waiting for me to say something, but when all that I can get out of me are labored wheezes, he speaks.
Is this something about your job, Uncle?
He asks.
You can talk to me about it. I promise I won't tell anyone. I know that you're in the business.
I don't work with drugs, Johnny, I say. This gives him pause.
You don't?
He takes a step closer to me. I can smell his unwashed clothes again.
If I may ask, Uncle, what work do you do? I promise I won't tell anyone.
I try to come up with a convincing lie, but before anything comes to mind, my attention's gripped away. Across the street, past the crowds of rowdy tourists, I see a familiar face. Dressed in a suit and a tie, smoking a cigarette next to an unmarked black van, stands a bald man with the face of a hammerhead. The man from the internet cafe. We need to get out of here. Pack your stuff, Johnny. We need to get out of this apartment. I push the kid back into the living room, echoes of a decade-old conversation with a disfigured man thunder in my head.
I trust that you have the capacity to imagine what will happen if you ever tell anyone about this meeting.
I do. I know that they're looking for me. I know they're out for revenge. I know that if they find Johnny, they will hurt him just to punish me. We need a place to hide, I say. I'm so sorry for dragging you into this, Johnny, but we need a place to hide, and we need to leave right now. He looks down at the crushed phone in my hand. I'm bleeding on his carpet.
Uncle, what do you do for a living?
He finally asks. I work in social media manipulation, I reply. My heart racing far too much to come up with a lie. I work in social media manipulation for some very bad people. He blinks. The words stumble out of his mouth as if they were in a foreign language.
Social media manipulation?
Yes, I reply.
My uncle works in social media manipulation,
He says, as if he was trying to find the taste of the idea. His face turns sour.
What sort of social media manipulation do you work in?
The first word that comes to mind is death cult. But I reach further back into my CV. Mainly elections, sometimes the stock market. Look, Johnny, we don't have time for this. There's some very bad people after me. We need to.
I thought you ran a pot operation,
he says.
I was fine with that. That stuff should be legal anyway. Sometimes I worried that you were transporting heroin or something like that, but I convinced myself you weren't that type of person. But social media manipulation, you're just as bad as the rest of them.
Them? For a second he remains silent. His eyes flutter between shock and anger as he weighs my character. Somewhere in the back of his head, Johnny is weighing our family bond and an unhealthy diet of documentaries about why the world is going to shit. The scales tip.
Them.
He hisses.
You're just like them, the rest of the family. You're all merchants of misery, taking away shit that isn't yours to take.
My heart aches at the thought of my nephew comparing me to a clan of car thieves and armed robbers, but then I remember the true horrors that I am responsible for. I also remember the shark-faced man outside, waiting. Johnny, the people who are after me will hurt you if they find you. I'm so sorry for dragging you into this, but we need to get out of this house right now. We need to go somewhere off the grid. The words strain in the back of my throat. I feel like a trapped animal. Under my panic, his face softens.
Okay,
he says, conflicted.
I know a place.
The kid gathers his stuff like he's just spent a day in the rain, and even though I know we're in imminent danger, his disappointment in me weighs down harder on my mind than the man waiting for us across the street. I'm not proud of what I've done. We'll talk about this. Right now is just not.
I don't want to talk about it. I know what sort of person you are now. I'm presuming that we shouldn't be leaving through the front door?
I nod.
Courtyard it is, then. Would be nicer with a flashlight, but you felt the need to break my phone.
I tell him that I'll buy him a new one, but he doesn't respond. He just walks out of the apartment towards the courtyard. Before leaving, I grab Johnny's sketchbook. I know we won't be coming back to the apartment. Our shared physical frailty leaves us both struggling over the fences in the courtyard, but we make it to another exit without any broken bones. We move through the streets in silence. There are enough people outside for us to blend in, but the crowds are sparse enough for me to make sure we're not being followed. I don't see the hammerhead anywhere. For a split second, I feel safe. But then we descend down into the subway.
Presuming that going to the police isn't an option, we need to get tickets.
Johnny says as he slides coins into the machine.
Wouldn't want to get hauled off.
I haven't exchanged any money, I say. Johnny sighs and puts another set of coins into the machine. With high-pitched screeches and mechanic coughs, 2 tickets emerge. I'll pay you back. I'm good for it. I hope to get a smile out of my nephew, but I don't.
I don't want a single cent of your blood money. Everything you ever gave me I will pay back.
He growls. I've never seen the kid angry before. In his sneer, I see my father's genes. It's not blood money, I say, remembering the blood money that fed me when I was a kid. Something snaps in Johnny. The controlled mask of anger on his face explodes into a scream.
Not blood money? Are you serious? Yeah, I'm sure the people who need to cheat in elections are just misunderstood and want to do the best for their country.
A group of tourists approaches the ticket machines but veers off after Johnny's outburst. The kid's voice drops to a low murmur.
My dad screwed over plenty of people with the cars. Grandpa did much worse, but you... I watch the news. People like you are the reason why the world is going to shit. You're responsible for more death and suffering than the whole family combined.
We don't speak again until we reach the bottom of the escalator. Which way are we going? I ask, seeing the words Smíchovské and Nádraží on the overhead map.
Cherný most. Final stop of the yellow line.
Johnny doesn't look at me. Instead, he slides up against the pillars of the subway station. He's invisible to the security monitors, and soon, so am I. I breathe a sigh of relief that we're heading away from the machine. The first couple of stations have me searching the face of every commuter for a hint of recognition, but as we make our way out of the center, I calm. We're not being followed. Johnny still refuses to look at me, and there's a good half an hour of subway in front of us. When I open his sketchbook, I see his eyes wander over. But as soon as I notice him, he goes back to watching the dark wiring of the subway fly past the window. His sketches are chaotic little snippets of Prague. A swan fishing a baguette out of the river. A man dressed like a knight getting arrested outside the castle. A vagrant sleeping beneath a Gothic church. There's some roughness in his strokes, but it's not something that a couple of months of practice wouldn't iron out. I stop myself at that thought. Johnny wouldn't be getting a couple months of practice. The thought of the raging inferno that's destined to be unleashed on the world strikes me harder than before. As I stare down at Johnny's drawing, I can't help but think, how many artists will have their progress cut short when the burning god comes to roost? In those imperfect lines of the sketchbook, I find another helping of soul-crushing guilt. When we emerge out of the subway station, the topology of the city changes beyond recognition. All the historical buildings and Gothic spires are gone. We're no longer in a medieval wonderland full of tourists. Now giant cement reminders of the communist regime surround us. As we walk through the Soviet-era housing blocks, I try to get Johnny to speak to me, but he rebuffs any attempt I make at conversation. We enter one of the identical panel houses, walk up a bunch of stairs, and then we're in front of a door. Johnny gives the door 3 sharp knocks. After a brief silence, a red eye appears in the peephole. It studies Johnny.
"Who is?"
comes a voice from the other side.
Dude, it's me.
Johnny says. The peephole goes dark, and what seems like half a dozen locks get unlatched. The red eyeball appears for one last glance, and then the doors fly open.
"Johnny!"
A boy in his late teens with a struggling beard leaps out at my nephew. He hugs him with the intensity of a veteran meeting a long-lost brother-at-arms.
"Azim, this is my uncle."
Johnny points to me as soon as the grasp of the hug loosens.
"We need to lay low for a bit. Can we stay here?"
"Of course."
Azim clasps Johnny on the shoulders.
"Of course you stay. Of course your uncle stay."
The apartment smells with exotic spices and weed. Sprawled out on the couch are 2 other hoodie-clad youths with fledgling facial hair. They're in the midst of some racing game that's booming from the television. In the corner of the room is a blonde girl, indulging in a gas mask bong. As soon as she registers us, she rips off the contraption and leaps at Johnny.
"Johnny!"
She yells, choking back bits of smoke.
"To what do we owe the visit?"
My uncle is visiting, and we need to lay low for a couple of days,"
Johnny says. The girl gives a knowing glance.
"We appreciate the line of business you're in."
For a split second, it looks like Johnny's gonna correct her, but he doesn't.
"Uncle, this is Sharka, and those 2 on the couch are Jabal and Latif. We'll be safe here. Just let me have a couple of words with Azim."
The 2 racers on the couch grunt in recognition, but don't look away from their game. The girl tries to make conversation with me, but her speech grows sluggish, and she just ends up staring at the bright colors on the television. I don't mind. My focus is wholly on the conversation happening in the kitchen. I can't hear them, but Johnny is explaining something to Azim. Occasionally the strange youth glances over to me, but he doesn't say anything. When Johnny's explanation is finished, Azim gives a solemn nod. The 2 emerge out of the kitchen.
"Follow, please,"
Azim says. We walk through the hallway of the apartment until we reach a metal door. Azim undoes another series of locks and then opens it. The stench of marijuana that lingered around the apartment is fortified with the aroma of a grow room. Azim walks past the dozen or so plants to a large cardboard box.
"Here is guns,"
he says, revealing a box full of weaponry and explosives.
"Wishing luck, Johnny."
And with another solemn nod, he leaves us alone in the fluorescent-lit room. "So these are your Taliban friends," I say once the shock from the box full of weaponry wears off.
"Ex-Taliban,"
he corrects me.
"And Sharka isn't an ex-terrorist, she just likes weed. And maybe me, I don't know. Look, the main point here is that if whoever is after you comes here, we'll be prepared."
I almost tell them the idea of a shootout is ludicrous. That the people who are after us won't be swayed by a couple of pistols and rifles, that even if we did somehow manage to shoot our way out of a situation, that they would just keep on coming. I almost tell them none of it matters because the world will turn to ash anyway, but I don't. "Good thinking, Johnny. I'm proud of you," I say instead. I can see him struggling with his anger towards me, but whatever dysfunctional bond our family has wins over.
"What do we do now, Uncle?"
Give me some time to think, Johnny. I can fix this. I don't believe the words coming out of my mouth, but he does. The kid gives me space to think. I stand alone only with the buzzing of the lights to keep me company. Outside, the once brainwashed teens that were set to kill civilians tap away at video games and take hits from an elaborate bong. Elsewhere in the city, people are falling in love, chipping away at their personal goals, struggling past obstacles to become better people. The thought that an all-consuming inferno will wipe any trace of humanity off the globe claws at the back of my mind. But the longer I stand in that room, the longer I think, the less pressing that thought becomes. I dig through the cardboard box. It's not just guns, a machete, some frightening-looking banners, loaded vests, recording equipment. There's enough stuff here to start a small terrorist cell. As I wrangle with the cords of the microphone, I get flashbacks to the pirate radio station my roommates and I started in college. The plan seems ridiculous when I first conceive of it, but the longer I stand in that room, the longer I breathe that hopeful air, the more I feel like I might just have a shot at undoing the damage that I've done. When I get out of the grow room, the sounds of video games and bong hits are long gone, and the only thing I can hear is the throaty snoring from one of the bedrooms, mixed with the chirping of birds outside. A sweltering morning sun peeks in through the windows of the apartment. It's hot, but I zip up my coat regardless. The couch in the living room is spread out in a makeshift bed. In it, half-clothed and locked in a tired embrace, I find my nephew and Sharka. I sneak past them, leaving them asleep. But as I work away at the locks of the apartment, I hear Johnny's voice.
Uncle?
He asks, still 1 foot in the land of sleep.
Where are you going, Uncle?
To get some coffee, I say.
Is that safe? Do you want me to come with you?
He asks. No. It's fine, Johnny. I need to clear my head a bit, I reply. For the first time since he found out what I do for a living, he smiles.
Uncle?
He says.
Are you stoned?
I consider whether my plan isn't just a byproduct of spending the night in the company of marijuana plants. I don't think so, I finally say. You want any donuts?
Sure,
Johnny replies.
But none of that exotic jam stuff. Gives me a stomachache.
The thought of our sheared taste buds makes me want to hug him, but I don't. Instead, I just say goodbye, unlatch the locks, and leave the apartment. It's difficult to leave him behind, but I know there's no other way. I make my way through the Soviet-era housing projects, praying that my plan will work. Praying that I will be able to destroy the machine.
Hi YouTube. Just like many of you, I have been following this whole The Machine thing. From the confession to the chase to the strange mingling with the Taliban, I have been sitting here on the other side of the world, trying to figure out if my life will suddenly end in a blistering inferno. My Google alerts have been watching the city of Prague and its metro system like a hawk. But for the most part, the only updates I was getting were concerning station reconstructions and pandemic statistics. Not a word about the machine. Monday afternoon, however, an article that grabbed my attention popped up. Sometime around noon, on the 5th of October 2020, there was seismic activity captured around Smíchovské Nádraží. Anything considering the station under which the machine is located would tug at my attention, but the idea of an unexplained small earthquake in Central Europe was absurd enough to occupy my whole day. The fact that the article disappeared within half an hour of being posted galvanized any hunches about the machine playing a part in all this. I tried contacting the original author of the article. No dice. I tried calling the management of the station. They mumbled something about a construction accident through a phone that was 1,000 years old. I tweeted at the mayor. He blocked me. Not feeling satisfied with the answers my research brought me, and still scared of waking up as a pile of ash, I went to the one place online where you always find answers regardless of whether your search was a good idea or not. The dark web. After hours of stumbling through the grimy parts of the net, I found something. Tucked away on the 24th page of search result, I found a file. EvidenceOfTheMachine.wav. This recording blows the whole case wide open. I can't be 100% certain, but I believe that what I have listened to is an account of the men who helped create the recruitment tools for the machine, coming face to face with the monstrosity that he has created. It also explains the seismic activity. I have tried posting the audio to every internet avenue I could think of, but all of the uploads are stuck at 99%. I don't know if there's some malicious force at play here or whether I should have switched to a better internet provider, but I will keep on trying to get the recording online. For the time being, however, I'll do my best to transcribe what happens on the recording. The world needs to know. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone between and beyond, I present to you EvidenceOfTheMachine.wav. The audio starts off with the dull sounds of fabric. Whoever is recording has the microphone wedged up deep in their pocket. After a couple of minutes of fumbles, a chime goes off somewhere in the distance.
Hello, welcome to Bohemia Bakery. What will it be today, sir?
A cheery voice asks. The owner of the microphone is a man, sounding somewhere in the ballpark of his late 30s. He orders a medium coffee and a plain croissant. For a couple of minutes, one simply hears the cafe's milquetoast Spotify playlist and the sounds of a man indulging in a sparse breakfast, but then the customer chime goes off again. Heavy footsteps approach.
Enough! You come with me.
A voice of raw stone demands.
Now.
There's more rustling. The barista yells something in the distance, but the sound of the struggle overpowers her. The customer chime goes off again. The man with the microphone is forced into some sort of a van. The doors slam shut. The car starts to move.
You run for long enough.
The rough voice booms.
But no one gets away.
I need to speak to Werner Sieg.
The man with the microphone says, in a tone as calm as his coffee order.
You will not speak with anyone. You speak enough already.
I have vital information that Mr. Werner Sieg needs to know.
Then you tell me.
No.
The man says calmly.
What I have to say is for Werner Sieg's ears only. If he finds out that you kept the information away from him, he'll blame you for...
You tell me now. No more games.
There's more ruffling of cloth. A struggle ensues. The man with the microphone is being strangled.
Tell me now. No more games.
The voice roars. Strained through chokes and coughs, the man with the microphone only manages a single sentence.
Werner Sieg will destroy you.
The choking continues, but the sounds of struggle are soon accompanied by grunts of frustration from the brute. Even though he's crushing his windpipe, the assailant keeps on demanding that the man with the microphone delivers his message. Doubt slithers into the mountain's voice. His speech starts to waver. His fear of Werner Sieg is laid bare. Finally, just as the choking sounds from the man with the microphone attain a terminal tone, he lets go. The banging of a monstrous paw on the side of the van overpowers the sounds of coughing and wheezing. The vehicle stops. The rough voice mumbles something to the driver. The only words that are recognizable are
Smíchovské Nádraží.
The man with the microphone continues to breathe heavily for a couple of minutes. But soon enough, the only thing that can be heard is the engine of the van and the occasional groans of passing trams. No words are spoken until the van doors open again.
Werner Sieg keeps his office in Smíchovské Nádraží. Guess I'm not surprised.
Shut up.
The other man grunts as he pulls him out of the van. The two enter the bustling train station. Bits of small talk from nearby commuters can be heard. A loudspeaker squawks out announcements of delays in a multitude of languages. The two keep on walking.
Northern side of the station. Interesting.
The man with the microphone says. His words are articulate. He's not mumbling to himself, he's giving directions.
Shut up!
The mountain repeats, the frustration growing in his voice. The sounds of the station grow faint and are replaced with echoing footsteps.
Second floor of the station. Hidden in one of the quiet corners of...
A dull thud. A choked yelp.
I told you to be quiet.
The other man says with a crackling fury.
One more word and I'll snap your neck.
The two continue walking in silence. Without a commentary, it is impossible to trace their steps. After a good 10 minutes of walking through the station, they finally arrive at the door. The gentle snaps of a fireplace can be heard in the room.
Mr. Werner Sieg. I found him, but...
The gruff man's voice rises back a couple of octaves. He's terrified.
He said he needed to talk to you. He said he has information.
Footsteps approach the duo. Short, angry taps of a cane can be heard.
I sent you out to kill the man who attempted to betray the entire organization. And not only do you spare his life, you bring him straight to my office.
The voice is tired, buried beneath a sort of injured strain, but beneath those words lies an undeniable power.
I'm sorry, Mr. Werner. I made a mistake.
Whack. After getting hit by the cane, the mountain ceases to speak.
Your apologies are worthless to me, yokel. Leave at once before my less charitable side shows.
Yes, of course, Mr. Werner. I am so...
Whack! And with that, the door closes. The man with the microphone remains silent. Only the crackling of the fireplace remains.
So?
The strained voice finally says,
What information do you have that is of enough import to put off your execution?
There is no information, sire.
The man with the microphone says with a newfound respect in his tone.
I simply told your grunt what he needed to hear in order to spare my life.
This gets a dry, raspy laugh out of Werner Sieg.
So you stayed your execution by an hour or so. Once a manipulator, always a manipulator. I have warned you many years ago of what would happen if you disobeyed me. I trust that you are intelligent enough to know that your misdeeds cannot go unpunished.
Yes, sire. I understand.
The man says,
Before I'm punished, I have one final request.
A request?
The word tumbles out of his mouth in a whisper, but that whisper soon turns into anger.
You dare walk into my office with a request? Who do you think you are? How dare you strut around here making demands?
I am the man who supplied you with enough labor to ensure that the machine could be completed 5 years ahead of schedule. If you had hired someone else to manage recruitment, they would have brought in a fraction of the workers that I have. Granted that an inferior campaign wouldn't trigger cybersecurity alarms across half the world. The machine exists because of me. I believe I'm entitled to a single request.
Silence. All that can be heard is the gentle roar of the fireplace.
What is your request?
Werner Sieg finally says,
Posting the confession was a mistake. A sentimental flight of fancy where I tricked myself into thinking I could stop the unstoppable. I know that before the day is done, I'll be dead. And I'm willing to accept my punishment. All that I ask is to see it. I want to see the horror which I helped construct.
The man with the microphone says,
Horror.
Werner Sieg laughs.
You help erect a portal to a realm which contains power beyond our comprehension, and you call it a horror. For someone who's able to tilt opinions of nations, your mind is rather unimaginative. You have, however, caught me in a charitable mood, and I find your bravery amusing. Follow me to your so-called horror.
2 sets of footsteps in a cane make their way through an echoing hallway. They stop. A rickety elevator arrives. Gentle sobs can be heard as the doors slide open.
Are these...
The voice of the microphone man grows weak.
Are these the recruits?
Have you no pride in your work?
Werner Sieg says,
Yes, this is the labor you've so proudly boasted about procuring for me.
The elevator groans to life, but the whimpering crowd drown out its mechanic sounds.
Why are they crying?
The man with the microphone asks.
I do not concern myself with such trivial matters.
Werner Sieg scoffs.
But would you not weep as well if you found yourself far from home and unable to comprehend your surroundings? Would you not shed tears for the free will that you once had?
After the doors of the elevator creak open, the weeping occupants exit in a tight procession of steps, but the wailing doesn't stop. It grows louder. It echoes through a massive hall.
There's hundreds of them.
The man with the microphone says in disbelief.
Thousands.
Vanity corrects him.
Thousands of lost souls sorted through the scrap metal that is delivered to the yard by train. They melt it down for valves and pipes. You should be proud. The thousands of workers you have bought me are feeding the machine. They are the backbone of its power.
I want to see it.
The man says.
I want to see the machine.
Without a word spoken, the tapping of the cane returns. The man with the microphone follows along. As the two walk through the echoing halls, a smattering of wails can be heard. The occasional bit of heavy machinery heaves in the soundscape. But the one constant sound, the sound that grows louder and louder as the two men walk through the hellish factory, is the roaring of flames.
That's her.
Venezik says.
That's the machine.
Even muffled by fabric, the massive fire can be heard. It's an unearthly roar, a horrid, crackling demand for more.
Do not look away from what you helped construct.
Venezik says.
Look deep into those frames and you will comprehend why it is necessary, why it is inevitable.
The flames roar on. This is no ordinary fire, no. The longer the inferno roars, the more apparent it becomes that there is something darker hiding within it. A voice. A dark voice speaking in ancient tongues. Whack! Venezik's cane sounds off once more.
I ordered you to look into the flames, yokel.
Whack!
I said look into the flames, see what you have done, accept what you have created.
The cane doesn't meet its target.
Working for you is the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. You're nothing but a madman, Werner Sieg.
The cane clatters to the ground.
How dare you!
Venezik screeches.
I will have you skinned for this insolence.
The jacket unzips. A hand brushes up against the microphone as an object is retrieved from the pocket.
You won't have a chance to skin me.
No, guards! Guards, shoot this man! Guards, he's wearing a suicide vest!
But Venezik's shrieks are soon hushed out by the roaring of the inferno. The man with the microphone sets out in a dead sprint towards the flames. They grow louder and louder. The voice hidden within them becomes clear in its dark whispers. The man mumbles something that is barely heard, and then, when the flames cannot grow stronger, a split second of a thundering boom ends the recording. I don't think that what Prague's Smíchov district experienced on October the 5th was an earthquake. I think it was an explosion. I think it was an explosion that destroyed that horrible contraption that was burning beneath the city. We're all safe from the raging fire of the machine, for now at least. I've re-listened to the recording countless times, looking for some sort of a hint about what will happen with the metal contraption hidden beneath Smíchovské Nádraží, but there are limits to how much information you can get out of a stranger's pocket. Your guess about the future of the machine is as good as mine, but here's to hoping we won't all be consumed by an unexpected inferno in the near future. There is, however, a section of the recording that I didn't notice until multiple listens. Right before the suicide vest goes off, as the man with the microphone runs towards the jaws of the monster he created, he yells something. The words are barely recognizable past the roaring of the flames and the rustling of his coat, but with some effort and noise cancellation software, I have been able to clean up the audio. Before he blew up himself and the apocalyptic machine he helped create, the man with the microphone screamed a single plea.
Please forgive me, Johnny.